Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Development Panel of Allerdale Borough Council. My name is Lee Jardine and I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and for the purpose of this meeting I am also the host. I will be assisting the committee with the use of technology to manage the process of the meeting. I will not have any control of the meeting and the meeting will not begin until instructed by the Chair. This meeting is currently being live streamed via YouTube and a recording will be made available afterwards. Everyone who has indicated that they are attending the meeting has now joined and the meeting is now. So what we'll do now is we'll go on to the introductions, starting with the members. If you can just ask the members to repeat their name and good afternoon, and we'll go from there. Starting with Councillor Granger.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Malcolm Granger. I'm chairing this meeting today.
Councillor Annison.
Good afternoon, Councillor Annison.
Councillor Daniels.
Good afternoon, Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Good afternoon, Councillor Janet Fairbrother.
Councillor Horsley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Daniel Horsley.
Councillor Kemp. Councillor Kemp, you may be on mute.
Lee, can Wayne have a crack with him, please? We can just.
Yeah, we'll have.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I was having severe problems here. Good afternoon, Councillor George Khan.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Good afternoon, Councillor Elaine Lynch.
Councillor Semple.
Good afternoon, Councillor Andy Semple.
Councillor Tyson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Tyson.
Thank you. Now we'll move over to the officers. If you can just say your name.
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Alan Smith present.
My apologies. We can just move on to the officers, please. Simon Sharp.
Good afternoon, my name's Simon Sharp. I'm the Planning and Building Control Manager.
Rebecca Wilson.
Good afternoon, my name is Rebecca Wilson. I'm Senior Planning Officer in Development Management.
Sharon Sewell.
Good afternoon, Sharon Sewell, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Lindsay Tomlinson.
Good afternoon, Lindsay Tomlinson, Deputy Monitoring Officer.
Gail Roach.
Good afternoon, Gail Roach, Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you. We also have our IT and communications team on the meeting. Thank you all for your introductions. Please can participants remain on mute throughout the meeting unless intending to speak. To speak, please can members use the raise hand icon to indicate they wish to speak and only speak when requested by the Chair. Once you've finished speaking, please can you lower your hand. To vote on items, the Chair will ask myself as Democratic Services Officer to go through each member alphabetically. Each member will reply with their name and then I vote for, against or abstain. I will now formally hand you over to the Chair to start the meeting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As previously stated, my name is Malcolm Granger, Deputy Chair of the Development Panel for Allerdale Borough Council. I will chair today's meeting. You've been introduced to the members and officers in attendance today. The planning applications under consideration today will be decided by the members of the panel, who are councillors, and we are supported by officers in attendance. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Armstrong, who's been replaced by Councillor Kemp. We have apologies from Councillor Coburn, apologies from Councillor Kirkbride, and apologies from Councillor Mumby. Councillor Mumby has been replaced by Councillor Annison. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, declaration of interest. Councillors, staff to give notice of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest, or any other interest, and the nature of that interest relating to any item on the agenda in accordance with the adopted code of conduct. Do we have any declared declaration of interest, please? I'll take that as a no, Lee. Item 3, questions. to answer questions from councillors and members of the public submitted in writing or by electronic mail no later than 5 p.m. 2 working days before the meeting. Do we have any questions?
No questions received, Chair.
Moving on to the first application, which is item FUL 2019/0304, the full planning for the erection of 81 dwellings and associated infrastructures, land at Stainburn Hall Farm, Stainburn, Workington. Over to you, Simon Sharp.
Simon, just to interrupt, I'm just going to admit the speakers into the meeting now. Okay, speakers should be in the meeting. Speakers, can you put yourselves on mute and knock your cameras off, please? We're going to start the item now. Thank you.
Lee, how do I knock the actual camera off?
It's okay for now. If you can't knock it off, don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Simon, over to yourself.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. So this first application is a full application. So members are considering the principle of development as well as the details. Just a bit of policy background, which is obviously pertinent to all applications going forward, but obviously for this one too. Members will be aware that last week at full council, part 2 of the local plan was adopted. That means for the purposes of decision making, part 2 becomes part of the development plan alongside part 1. Therefore, by law, it has primacy in decision making. It is your first port of call for consideration of applications. And just to recall, part 1, which has been adopted since 2014, includes the strategic policies and also the bulk of the detailed policies. Part 2, adopted last week, includes the site allocations, including residential site allocations, as well as new settlement limits, and also includes some detailed policies, 3 of which are relevant to this application this afternoon. So the 1999 local plan and matters of tilted balance, which members have become very familiar with in the past few months, not relevant today. Indeed, the 1999 local plan and its settlement limits have been consigned to history. Members need not refer to that plan ever again. So in that context, there's some points to note for members. So the site is part of an allocation in part 2 of the local plan. So it's part of an allocation within the development plan, the adopted local plan, and it's also within the adopted settlement limits in the part 2 local plan. As such, officers' advice is that although the principle of development does need to be considered, we'd probably advise, well, we will advise members against resisting development per se here, because you only adopted the local plan part 2 last week. It's within the settlement limits and it's part of an allocation. I think what is on the table is, and it's something that's been referred to in representations from third parties, including the town council, is it appropriate for just part of the allocation to come forward at this time, and specifically the part which is further away or furthest away from the existing settlement, from the existing limits of Stainburn, leaving a gap effectively between the development and the existing built envelope. And obviously also what's also for consideration is an assessment of the proposal against the detailed policies of part 1 and those of Part 2 as well. So matters such as residential amenity, highway safety, biodiversity, landscape and visual impact, for example. Just one particular note that members might have noted is that there is one particular policy in Part 2 of the local plan in relation to affordable housing, which does on the face of it contradict the old or the other Part 1 local plan policy on affordable housing. And the officer's advice is clear. They're both part of the development plan. The Part 2 policy is more recent, and that's the policy that should take precedence here. So with regard to affordable housing, as you'll see from the officer's report, it's the Part 2 local plan policy that leads rather than the Part 1 policy. And just I had one question put to me before the meeting by a member regarding the affordable housing provision. This obviously is for 4 dwellings for social rent, so that's rent the level of which is controlled through the national rent regime, and that's controlled through the obligations of a Section 106 agreement. The 4 dwellings is below the Part 2 policy provision on the face of it, but as you will see from the policies, to be consistent with the national planning policy framework, viability has to be taken into consideration as a material consideration. And indeed, the applicant submitted a viability appraisal, which has been reviewed on the council's behalf by a peer reviewer. And all that information has been made public and is on the public website. Up until September of last year, such appraisals were kept confidential as a default position. That's no longer the case. They're open for examination and assessment by all. So that Section 106 agreement, and you'll see the recommendation, the officer's recommendation is worded as such to be caveated to granting permission subject to that Section 106 agreement, and also conditions. The 106 agreement delivers off-site highways infrastructure works, notably the extension or the provision of 40-mile-an-hour limit along the existing highway, and the 4 dwellings for rent. Now, if you'll permit, Chair, I'll take you through some slides which show the proposal. There's also then photographs which show the site and the site context. And then we'll move on to some video shot in the vicinity of and within the site. And I'll just clarify a few points as we go along. So I'll just share the screen now, and we'll move on to the slides. Are all members seeing the slides, please? Can you just nod? Yeah, I'm getting nods. Thank you very much. So this is the application site in red. You can see that it comprises of agricultural fields. In this area, and if members can see the cursor, this field hay has just been recently saved, and you'll see that in the photographs to come. You can see the detachment from Stainburn here. This is part of the allocation, but not part of the allocation, or not part of the application site. So the site does touch the existing settlement here, but there is this field which is part of the allocation separating the bulk of the site from the settlement limit. You'll notice, and you'll see this from the photographs, that the actual site itself is devoid of any landscape features. There is one mature tree here, which you'll see in photographs, and a hedgerow. You'll also see that from this aerial photograph that the application site dissects a field here. So that will become evident from the photographs. The photographs are either taken from the site frontage along the highway or within this field, which is the field you'll see is characterised by hay recently being saved. This is the electricity installation that you'll see in the photographs. And then you rise up to the Clifton petrol filling station here. For members to get their bearings, this is Great Clifton. This is Stainburn. This is the A66, Stainburn bypass. This is the old A66, the road through Stainburn and through to Clifton. That's the Derwent. And that's going towards Bearpot on the periphery of that photograph. So this is the topographical survey of the site, so how the site looks at the minute. You'll see the amount of contours on the site. So the site falls away from the north, from the northern boundary, the northern hedge, to the south, and then does rise up again when you cross the field boundary in this sector. And this area, as you'll see in the photographs, is uncultivated. It's quite boggy. It's best described as a wildlife area, and that will become evident in the photographs and also the proposal. So this is the proposed layout plan. So it's a full application. So members are considering all the details here today. So just trying to get the cursor onto the screen. There she goes. This is the road, the old A66 at the top. This is Stainburn, the settlement Stainburn here. So you can see that there'll be a single vehicular access here into the site at the western end of the site frontage. That's not an access there. That's just a private drive serving that's going up to this house here. So that's not an access. Existing hedge to be retained and also deepened here in this wedge here. This is the electricity installation, the substation in this location. So the road will follow the contour and then it will drop down and then follow the contour. I think your members will see that the town council referred to serried ranks of houses for dwellings. You can see the officers' thoughts on that matter in the report, and how the proposal actually uses the topography. And actually, there's a lot of variation, and a lot more variation than might first seem apparent when you look at this plan. The other thing that's quite apparent from this plan is the amount of undeveloped area of the site, green area. You can see here that the pathway snakes, zigzags down, obviously because of the contours of the land, the topography. It's not appropriate for it just to fall directly down the hillside. So it snakes down. This is that area which we'll see in the photographs, which is the uncultivated wildlife area, which will essentially remain as such. You can see here that there is surface water attenuation. There's SUDs being proposed in this locality. You'll also see as part of the proposal that there are bungalows as part of the mix, and we'll see that in more detail in a second. I've just zoomed in to the frontage so members can get a better idea of these access arrangements. The vehicular access at the western end of the frontage. Oops, beg your pardon. And there you can see the hedge and the enhancement of that area, the fillet of further landscaping. You can obviously come back to these slides if members wish at any point during the consideration of the application. So obviously the section 106, the recommendation refers to off-site infrastructure works, quite limited off-site infrastructure works to enable a 40-mile-an-hour limit to be provided. This is the hatched area, extending it eastwards towards Great Clifton. The one other point that members will see from this plan is the green line. It's very faint, but it follows where my cursor is the visibility splays. These are the visibility splays required to meet the county standards. And of note, because of the curvature of the road and the verge, this means that with the exception of a small stretch, the vast majority of the frontage hedge will be retained, because the visibility splay quickly comes onto the verge and then out actually into the roadway itself. So I know members will be familiar, we've had quite a few discussions with regard to the site at Thursby, and also the site last time out at Blencogo, where there was a lot of hedge coming out to enable the visibility displays to be implemented. That's not the case here, so it's materially different to Blencogo in that respect. And I've just zoomed out now just to show the extent of this green, blue hatching, to show the extent of this new 40-mile-an-hour limit along the site frontage. This is the electricity installation to give you some idea of that extent required by the County Highways Authority. And of course, with the 40-mile-an-hour limits in place, that informs the visibility displays required. So this plan shows the proposed sections across the site and down the site. So the first section, we'll zoom into these in more detail in a moment, but this section, the top one, is showing the site from the south on this side, looping up to the north this side. So you can see how there is actually the lowest point is not at the southern end, it's actually down at the bottom where the existing field boundary is. You can also see how bungalows are being proposed as well in this plan. We'll zoom in a section in a moment. So this will give an idea of how those streetscapes will form. So you can see how the roof lines are varied, how the eaves lines are varied, how the massing is varied. So, albeit on plan view, at first sight, you can see where the Town Council's comments about the serried ranks may be coming from. In great examination, you can actually see what relief is provided by introducing different house types and the topography across the site. So that's in detail showing that southern end of that cross section with the bungalows. You can see the separation distances and how low those bungalows are in terms of massing. And as referred to in the officer's report, there's obviously quite a substantial variety of dwellings being proposed here. 2, 3 and 4 beds, semi-detached, detached, bungalows, 2-storey houses. So it's quite a breadth. And that's obviously going to foster quite a balanced and mixed community of different sizes of family households, different age groups, etc., which is obviously good for the sustainability of a development. And this is another example of how those roofscapes and the roof lines vary. So just a canter, if I can, Chair, a canter through the different dwelling types. So you can see this is a bungalow. So what we're picking up here is traditional gabled forms. Now, this is not a modernist development. It's not pushing the architectural boundaries. It's referencing the gabled forms that exist in Stainburn. And as we've referred to in the officer's report, it's quite an eclectic mix of dwelling types and materials in Stainburn. There's render, rough cast render, there's brick, there's stone, there's red brick, there's buff brick. There's, you know, it's quite an eclectic mix, of house styles. There is a particular quality of houses in Stainburn. Members are familiar with Stainburn, particularly the interwar houses that line the main thoroughfare through. Classic sort of low density, mature landscaped interwar ribbon development of particular high quality. So there's something really to reference there, and this will obviously become, if it gets granted, a new settlement edge, and that, you know, you need to think very carefully about how this gateway to Stainburn will appear when coming from the Great Clifton direction. Obviously, Stainburn, for local plan purposes, is part of Workington. It's part of the principal centre, and it's not a parish in its own right. But nevertheless, Stainburn clearly has an identity of its own and is quite self-contained in terms of its visual form, separated from the bulk of Workington, in the same way, for example, that Harrington and High Harrington are. So just punching through again, you can see these gabled house type forms, bay windows, canopies, casement windows. See variation of materials on some of these dwellings with a mix of materials. Another bungalow type. Semi-detached dwellings, as I referred to, it's not just detached dwellings that are being proposed, so there's the smaller house types. Some have integral garages, some have attached garages. More of the semi-detached houses. So now we move on to the photographs. We'll take you eastwards along the main thoroughfare along the Stainburn Road. So we're in the settlement itself, looking east towards Great Clifton. You can see the bus stop. You'll see in the officer's report for West Cumbria, it has a regular bus service. Members familiar with the X4, X5 route will know that the buses travel through Stainburn. This is looking west back towards the Ribey pub. It's just on the left-hand side. You can just see, if I get the cursor to the sign there. And that's the westbound, Workington-bound bus stop there with the shelter there. So you can see, and I know this has been referred to in representations from third parties, and something for important consideration by members, is the footway is on the north side of Stainburn Road, not the side, not the side, the south side. So we've just gone further west into Stainburn. You can see the type of development. You can also see the landscaping that exists. There's a really nice balance between the natural and built environment in Stainburn along the main thoroughfare here. There's the farmstead with the allocation foresees the development through into the south of that farmstead, as you'll see in part 2 of the local plan. Giving you more of that context. So now we're coming out eastwards. So we're out of the settlement now, and this is the site boundary on the left-hand side, marked by the hedge. So this hedge, it's a large proportion of it is hawthorn. There is some blackthorn. I also spotted some sycamore in it as well. So it's a mixed field species hedgerow. So very much part of a countryside character, rather than a urban or suburban character. You can see the footway which the photographer is standing on, and you can see that it's on the opposite side of the road to the site. This is the section where the extended 40-mile-an-hour will apply. So we're moving further eastwards away from Stainburn. You can see if you can see the cursor, the electricity installation with the pylons also on the left-hand side. You can see the lower poles, which traverse the site, which will be buried underground if the site goes ahead. So now we've pulled back, we're going towards, or near, this is just near to the start of the petrol filling station's access, if people are familiar with the road between Stainburn and Great Clifton. The site, if you can just see, this is the substation buildings and all the other electricity paraphernalia. The site, you can just see, is the sort of beigey colour. That is the site, and there's the site boundary. Obviously, as I say, and we'll see in a moment, the farmers recently saved the hay, and so you'll see that the site is the yellower colour rather than green. So now the camera's pulled back to the lay-by, which is actually east of the petrol filling station. There's the totem sign of the Clifton petrol filling station. There's the site in the yellow. You can see just there is the electricity substation buildings and paraphernalia. And there on the horizon is the start of the existing settlement of Stainburn. And there, members can see the cursor, is the existing hedgerow. But now we're actually in the site. So this on the left-hand side is the boundary hedgerow. So on the other side of that hedge is the road. That's the substation, which obviously defines that boundary. And the site, as you can see, falls away from the north gently down to the south, and then will rise again. So you can see the open countryside beyond the site rising up, going towards, well, if you carried on going over that brow in that direction, you'd hit the A66 bypass. Cameras swing around gently to the south. You can now pick up the turbines on the, just trying to get the cursor to pick them up, but they're there on the right hand side there on the horizon. View looking south, so you've got quite a mesh of the existing the pylons, the turbines. You can just see the fells poking up above the near horizon. You can also see the existing developments in Stainburn flanking Moor Road. Trees that I talked about earlier. So this photograph is quite important because actually this is the site where the hay has been saved, but it's also part of this field as well. So it goes across this hedge line. So it's important for members to note. So now we're swinging around looking southwest, so you can see the existing development in Stainburn. You can see the boundary hedge. Just around this corner, we'll see it in a moment, is the wildlife area. But you can see how the land falls again from the north down to the south. Cameras are swung around to look west now, with that hedgerow on the right hand side. So the access will punch through about here. You can see the overhead lines which are to be buried underground across the site. Just for the site, they'll appear overground beyond the site's limits. Now we're looking east again, so you can see not only the slope, but you can also see how the landscape is rather I'd go as far to say is dominated by the grid paraphernalia, the pylons and the electricity substation. So we're now looking up the slope towards the northern boundary. One thing you'll see from the officer report is that one of the site considerations in part 2 of the local plan is that there's a preference for development to face onto the road. And you will see in members an explanation in the officer's report as to why that particular site consideration has not been followed. Couple of reasons, one of which it would either necessitate this hedge being punctured quite a few times to get private driveways through it, which is not very desirable, to be honest. And the second one is, if you don't have those private driveways puncturing the hedge, you'd end up having a shared private drive or an adopted highway behind that hedge. And then the houses would then be further down the hillside. So any sort of visual benefit of housing fronting the road would be lost anyway. You'd also have a development that would be less viable than the one proposed, because you've only got single-sided development, and that means that you're effectively doubling the cost for the road per dwelling. And also, I think with the desired retention of the hedge and the buffering of that boundary, it rather is meaningless anyway to have frontage development, because what you want coming from the Clifton direction is that transition from countryside to the suburban character of Stainburn, and having development backing onto that hedge with no accesses through and the hedge retained, officers feel fulfills that desire, although there is obviously that degree of conflict with the site consideration in the local plan part 2, and something for members to consider very carefully. So that's again the site looking west, looking so you can see the slope of the land. Now we're right down into that southwest corner. So this is the wildlife area, the area uncultivated. You can see how uncultivated it was. I took this particular photograph and I can confirm it was pretty boggy underfoot. We've had obviously quite a few wet days, but it nevertheless is July, and I could tell that this area is sodden regularly, if not all the time. I don't think it's an area that, judging by what species are growing there, it's an area that really dries out at all. And I know drainage has been referred to in a number of the representations, and is clearly a consideration for members today. So I just wanted to refresh members. So this is not a new slide, it's just a repeat, just so members of, after seeing the photographs, they're fully aware of the site extent. So this is that wildlife area. This is the hedge. This is the substation with the pylons. This is the area of the allocation outside of the application site. This is Stainburn with the main thoroughfare through. Bus stops are about here. Footway on the north side, not on the site side. If you like, inverted commas, village shop, the petrol filling station is here.
Excuse me, Simon.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We've lost one of our members, so is it possible, Chair, to have a short adjournment for 5 minutes while we try and get him back onto the meeting?
We'll adjourn the meeting till quarter to 2.
Yeah, members, sorry about this. Can you please all knock your cameras off and your mics off, please? Speakers, can you do exactly the same thing? Just knock your cameras and your mics off and we'll return at 13:45. Thank you.
Thank you, people. Thank you.
Right, Chair. Simon, we're okay to resume.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll just take you back to the screen share if I can. Are all members seeing that? If members could just indicate to nod. Yep, thank you. So just a refresh as well about this layout. You can see how there is a single point of access at the northwest corner. You can see the hedge retention and enhancement. You can see the areas undeveloped in the site. And you can see how the dwellings are arranged with their front and then rear gardens as you cascade down the site. So just before I go on to the videos, I just wanted to emphasise some of those Part 2 site considerations, which are really important. Obviously, the part of the adopted plan now, and need to be front and centre in members' considerations as they were in the officer's assessment. Particularly things like the biodiversity net gain. Obviously, we're still waiting for the environment bill to go through Parliament, but what we do have is a local plan allocation here with such considerations included. And you'll see some of the conditions are worded in such a way, for example, condition 6 on page 35, which starts with the word notwithstanding. So it's looking for enhanced details with regard to landscaping to ensure there is that that biodiversity gain and there is that quality of habitat within the site. It's really important. It's clearly stated in the local plan part 2, and we need to be sure that it's included in proposals going forward. This site clearly, the layout allows for that to happen with the density proposed and the undeveloped public space proposed. I just wanted to, before I get on to the videos, just repeat this slide, which shows the southern boundary of the site. So just so members are not confused, it does cross this boundary hedge onto the other side, to the south side. And you also to show the context that this is not virgin open countryside. It is countryside which is characterised by man-made interventions. Obviously, you've got the substation to the east, and then the petrol filling station, and then to the south, you've got the pylons and the turbines. But nevertheless, it is an attractive landscape. It's got, you know, the hedgerows. It's got mature trees. It is a landscape that is rightly valued by members of the community. There's been identified of what wildlife exists in the locality, and it's clearly enjoyed by the community. And during the officers' site visits, more than one officer and more than one site visit, we noted, there was a steady stream of communities of Clifton and Stainburn using the pathway along the Stainburn Road, and also on more than one occasion, people actually stopping at the existing gate to appreciate this landscape and take in this landscape. So that's something to be considered by members, albeit it is an allocation, so the principle of development is here, but it's got to be the right quality of development to ensure that that change, that irrevocable change that's going to happen with the development of the site is appropriate. So if I just switch on to the videos, members still seeing my screen. I just, if Councillor Granger can nod, thank you. So if we start off with the village fringe and the farm, we'll just, can members still see that? I think, yeah. This is panning around to the east towards the site. You can see the site, which is just here beyond the lorry. This is the site frontage, so you can see the electricity substation. You can see the fells in the distance to the south, and the camera's panning around to look west, and there's the start of the village. And as there on cue is a member of the public using that footway. I say it is a very well-used footway. It obviously connects to the shop, the petrol filling station, but it's also used by people between Stainburn and Clifton. This is near to that southwest corner, the wildlife area, and as the camera swings around to the looking east, you can see the substation, and now we're swinging around to the hedge which is within the site. So the site extends to the south of that, and there's the mature broadleaf tree there. So you can see as the camera stops, we're looking south now. This is inside the hedge, so camera swinging around. There's the fells, and there's Stainburn, the existing development. You can hear the traffic in the background if you can hear it, and there's the hedge, which is the hedge on the northern boundary. You can see it's a mix of hawthorn and blackthorn, bits of sycamore, etc. I think that suffices for the videos share. So just moving on, there was one comment from the town council in relation to the national grid infrastructure, and particularly the new gen project. So this was a town council reference. So we can just confirm that it was a provisional route across the site for a national grid upgrade to connect to the new gen project. The new gen project fell away, so the easement was not safeguarded through the site. So it's not a material consideration for members today. National Grid didn't object to the allocation because they could see that there was no longer any need to safeguard an easement for a National Grid connection through the site. So just all members might have picked that up in the town council representation, but it's not for a consideration today. Finally, before I hand back to you, Chair, there is just reference to the late list. Members will have been circulated some just tweaks to the conditions, which just pick up on latest plans which have been in the public domain. They don't materially affect the proposal at all. It's actually just to align plan reference numbers for ease and clarity rather than actually changing the proposal at all. So just wanted to clarify that, but the conditions are amended as such. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Simon. Now we have some speakers, have we, Lee?
Yeah, Chair. The first speaker today is Ian Massey. Ian, if you can unmute yourself and begin, you'll have 5 minutes. If it gets to the point where we need to intervene, we will.
Thank you.
So just waiting on Ian, Chair.
Am I on? Can you hear me?
You are.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Simon has said a lot of what I've already going to say, but I'll just reiterate a few things. So this presentation has been reviewed by many of the objectors, and the aim of this presentation is to bring changes to the application so we can improve the safety and the environment of the Stainburn area. We understand the national desire for more homes, and we've read the local plan requirements. We do not agree with the dwellings being in an infrastructure zone, but it is in your local plan. Now, the local plan part 2, 1-WOR-0504/R, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, the eastern end of this application, which as Simon has alluded to, he's missed a few things. It's also, not only does it have a substation, overhead power lines, it also has a water main running through it, and opposite there is a reservoir. So it's almost completely surrounded by national type infrastructure. So we feel that you must make sure that the whole of this development is not going to compromise either the electricity or the water supplies. We'd like to make sure that the application, the WOR 0504 is for 130 dwellings. This application is for 81, and therefore I think the point that Simon's made is that we've got concerns that we're going to end up with an isolated piece of development stuck between infrastructure, and we don't feel comfortable about for the whole of the infrastructure part. Now, the environmental assessment we believe should also be on 130 houses for the whole site. The revised assessment may show some shortfalls, particularly about Scales Beck. Now, this is the river at the stream at the bottom of the site. It has got a wildlife area, but that wildlife area continues and is on either side of the stream and needs to be properly assessed. We don't think that's been properly assessed. We'd also like to note about the Stainburn Hall Farm and barn. You've seen it on the video. That's an 1841 barn, and really all of that is part of the street scene, and that really does need to be taken into account. Now, the barn is not on this application, but it's part of the whole site. So again, how is all that going to fit together? I'm not confident, and we're not confident that the information we've got is sufficient to be able to fully understand what's going on. Now, we've also talked about the approach road from Clifton to Stainburn, about the arrangements of the access. Now, the problem we've got is that that's supposedly going to be 40 miles an hour. But when you've got traffic coming into there, you've got hedges, and on the opposite side, you've got grassed reservoirs. It doesn't feel like an urban environment. It seems more like a road. And we believe, and we've shown this, if you go and visit site, you can see the speed at which the traffic comes through there. We don't believe having this junction from this site onto a 40-mile-an-hour limit, which we know people struggle to come in at that speed, is safe. We would like to see changes and further work put in by Cumbria County Council. In addition, you've seen on the video and the photos about the junction at the Briery. That is onto the Moor Road. This is a dangerous junction as now, and we would like to see further improvements in this to make this safe. Cumbria County Council Highways have put in previous work as part of the other applications, and unfortunately, they have made the arrangements far worse. So we'd like to have a full review of all of the infrastructure road arrangements around that area. So in summary, we suggest that, I know you've had some good videos, but we'd really feel that you should go to site to have a look and to get a feel of the speed of the traffic and how it all arranges and everything else that's in place. We would like to see a bit further on the environmental assessments, and we'd like to have put into context for the whole site, for the 130 houses, so all of the stuff's put in place, ready for those 130 houses. Now, we'd also like to make sure that you look at the barn and the other arrangements, and we'd like to feel that is retained in some way. We'd like you to put that as a condition. I know it's not for this application, but it is for the whole site. We'd also have a request that when you've pulled together those additional information, there's somehow you communicate to us as the residents what you're doing, so we don't get into an iteration, so we can make some comment before the developer comes back again, and then everybody's happy. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I've got my points over. Have you any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Lee, any questions to Mr. Massey, please? Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Massey, thanks for your presentation. I see that we obviously need to have, in your view, we need to consider the whole 130 houses development. Can you particularly tell me about the environmental issues that you feel might be detrimental if we don't consider it as part of the whole of the 130 house development? What is it you're particularly concerned about?
Okay, Simon's alluded to it. At the bottom of the site, there is a stream. There is a wet area, which actually is a temporary flood zone. So when it rains, actually summer or winter, this actually floods slightly. It does actually provide flood relief, and it's also a wildlife area. This adjoins, that stream runs through into the next part of the site. So we feel that the whole of that area needs to be looked at as a one, rather than, you know, are you going to put something in place like the SUDS arrangement that then actually cause problems with other things a little bit further down into the next part of the site? So the whole of that site, and also we know Simon's alluded to the fact there's new legislation coming through for enhancement. Obviously, this boundary is up to the edge of the stream for both of the development sites. But on the other side is also a flood zone, and it's also got some wildlife as well. So the whole thing really needs to have a proper look at, rather than just this little bit on its own. Is that all right?
Thank you, Mr. Massey. Thank you.
Thank you.
No one else? Questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Massey.
Righty-ho.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Are you taking me out now?
Yes, we will do.
And now, Mrs. Janice Lee, please.
No, Chair, sorry. We just before we go on to the next speaker, we do have some written representations from Doris and Andrew Caldicott, which will be read out by our officer.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. So this is from Doris and Andrew Caldicott, local residents. So they state, and I'll read this verbatim, the above reference states 81 dwellings. This, I feel, is a way to push through this development, as we are really talking about 130 dwellings on this site. I still do not agree with dwellings under or near to the substation. Also, the damage this plan will do to the environment, access and excess traffic onto the Stainburn Road just past a clearway. That is why the bypass was built in the first place. Due to me being unable to participate on Tuesday, the 28th of July, I endorse all that Councillor King, Ian Massey and Janice Lee say and state on this matter. This application should be refused or at least deferred until all issues are investigated fully. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Now we've got the next speaker, which is Janice Lee. Janice, if you want to unmute yourself and begin your 5-minute presentation.
You're on mute, Mrs. Lee.
I'll try and unmute you.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah, you've got 5 minutes if you want to begin.
Well, my concerns about a new housing development in the already overcrowded area of Stainburn and the fact that the boundary of Stainburn is being extended to accommodate it. Stainburn has been expanded many times over the last 30 years, Cairns Chase, Wentworth Park, Moorlands Drive, and this has put added pressure on limited facilities in the area. That is, we have one pub and one small shop attached to our nearby garage. The aforementioned developments were built as an extension to existing properties, not in isolation, and the increase in housing has also led to an increase in traffic using Moor Road to access both the A595 and Stainburn Road. Another development will increase this further, Moor Road being the obvious link and a shortcut for both leisure and work purposes. Ian has alluded to the junction at the entrance to Moor Road off Stainburn Road, which has been altered to accommodate pedestrians, but due to a lack of signage or road markings, no one knows how to use this junction properly, and vehicles often take this corner at speed. And quite often vehicles are then parked across the carriageway, waiting to enter the junction due to traffic travelling towards Stainburn Road not giving way. As you enter Moor Road, about 200 yards down, a minimum of 4 or 5 vehicles are usually parked just past the junction of Bridedale Lane, just after a left-hand bend, creating another obstruction and causing speeding vehicles to brake sharply. An accident waiting to happen, and Moor Road is driven at speed by a lot of motorists who, with no respect for other road users. This proposed development will be an isolated one with entrance-exit onto a very quick stretch of road that Ian's alluded to. Cars exiting the nearby garage and driving towards Stainburn are often overtaken by existing traffic using the road, heading uphill and towards the bend in the road just prior to where the entrance to this new estate will be located. I've been overtaken on this stretch of road on many occasions. I think unless you know the area well and use the surrounding roads on a regular basis, I can't see how this new development is going to add anything positive to the area, and I ask you to consider rejecting the application. As I say, I fully endorse the comments of my fellow objectors. Surely there are brownfield sites that could be developed where traffic, infrastructure, etc. could be better accommodated. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. A question for Mrs. Lee, please. Councillor Fairbrother.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Lee, when you refer to the Moor Road, that's the road that goes through to Oily Johnny's, is it? That's lots of people would use that to go to Whitehaven.
Used to go to Whitehaven, yes, in that direction, which of course a lot of people from Sellafield use that road on a regular basis.
So can you tell us a little bit more about why it is so dangerous? What's the problem really?
It's the increased volume of traffic and the speed at which they drive. They don't seem to have much regard to pedestrians or other people using the road. You know, I use that road 2 or 3 times a day, exit at the Briery Junction to go into town or to do other things. And it is a very fast stretch of road. It's not it's not wide at the top either. It's a road used as a rat trap, really.
Excuse me, does it have a speed limit on it at the moment?
Well, I'm presuming it'll be the 30 mile an hour, and then as the entrance to the Cairns Chase, etc., the pavements come out. But again, not very well lit. In my opinion, quite dangerous. Yeah, so 30 mile per hour zone ends as you head up further up Moor Road, which is a 60 mile per hour. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. Thank you, Mrs. Lee.
Thank you.
There are no more other questions. We will carry on to.
We have, Chair, just we have another written representation, this time coming in from Councillor King, and that'll be read out by our officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. So this is from Councillor Janet King, one of the ward councillors, who is unable to be here today for very good reasons, because of an illness to a close family relative. So Councillor, I'll read this verbatim again from Councillor King. The local plan has allocated 1/WRO/0504/R for 130 houses. And as this application is for the majority of these houses, the whole site requirements need to be addressed by this application. Having examined the plans for this application, I believe it should be deferred until the following issues have been addressed. 1. The site extends the boundary of Stainburn village and would be the new entry point to the village. On the old A66, at a suitable point, there needs to be appropriate enhancing features installed, e.g. welcoming signage, as well as traffic calming measures. Therefore, a combined feature is requested. 2. There are minimal local community facilities within Stainburn, which needs to be addressed as the size of Stainburn has increased significantly in recent years. There is no community hall where local groups can meet, no shops, no post office, and one public house restaurant that has no function rooms. The nearest facilities are at a petrol station with a very limited stock of groceries and no pavement along the road, so is unsuitable for pedestrians, or at Great Clifton, which is too far for the majority of residents to walk. There is also only a minimal bus service. The development is further out of town than the rest of the village, and in the light of climate change, this will increase emissions and restrict the ability of people to walk or cycle to shops. 3. This development has a high proportion of 3 and 4 bed family houses, but has very limited child play areas. Further areas need to be allocated. 4. The housing layout is a series of straight lines, and the houses are not varied, which is not in keeping with the likes of recent good quality designs. For example, on Derwent Meadows, Briery Acres, and the Avenue. 5. The environmental areas need protected from damage by people, whilst allowing wildlife enhancement. The original environmental assessment was a snapshot of one day, which does not allow for movement of animals and birds in and out of the area, nor the annual cycle of flora that may be present. There are also several colonies of red squirrels that must be protected from disturbance. 6. I recommend that these changes are presented for discussion prior to the applicant resubmitting a revised application. And that concludes the letter from Councillor King. Thank you, Chair.
Have we any more letters, Lee?
Yes, Chair, we have one more, and this has come from the applicant, which will again be read out by the officer.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank
Over to
you.
you, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this is from the applicant, Genesis Homes. And I again read it verbatim. Genesis Homes would like to thank officers and members for the opportunity to present this application to you today. As a Cumbrian business, we are extremely proud in progressing a further scheme within Allerdale. Genesis Homes was formed in 2017, just 3 years ago. The company now employs over 45 members of staff from North and West Cumbria, with our head office based in Penrith. This is our third development in Allerdale after successfully completing the sale of our final house at Workington last month and continuing construction at St Bridget's, Brigham. We have experienced and learnt a considerable amount from these two developments, of which the proposal in front of you today benefits from in terms of design and delivery. It is our vision at Genesis to create aspirational homes that are within reach of many, with thought for the specific amenities and landscape of our development sites. The vision commitment is demonstrated within this application at Stainburn. Firstly, the scheme proposes a low density of just over 11 homes to the acre. The majority of new housing developments seeks 14 to 16 homes per acre. Secondly, a substantial 4.4 acres is dedicated to green infrastructure, including open space, formal play areas, wildlife meadows, and planting. Thirdly, the hedgerow along the northern boundary of the development will be retained and enhanced, with significant planting creating a visual and wildlife buffer. Fourthly, a woodland path will link the development, which includes planting and informal play equipment. Fifthly, the layout itself has been largely shaped by the topography, existing utilities, access location, and drainage requirements. The mix of houses and bungalows reacts to the existing gradients of the land, creating an attractive streetscape and character. Sixthly, the provision of 19 bungalows equates to over 20% of the development site, meeting both accessible home standards and the needs of the borough. The development will bring many benefits to Allerdale, accompanying the supply of high quality housing. Firstly, the proposed scheme will provide inward investment of over £15 million. Secondly, experience tells us over 1/3, circa £5 million, will be spent on local labour through wages and remuneration. Thirdly, this development will employ over 15 subcontract trades and in excess of 100 people. Fourthly, the benefits filtered to local shops and services that will see additional expenditure both during the construction and once complete. Next, as well as the payment of additional council tax and the new homes bonus for the council. This is a high quality housing scheme and we welcome the officer's recommendation for approval, having worked tirelessly over the past 6 months to meet the objectives of the district with this flagship housing development. That concludes the speech from the applicant. It's read verbatim, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. We having that break earlier, Lee. Should we just continue with questions to the officers?
Completely up to yourself, Chair.
Is that all right with you, Simon?
So completely up to you, Chair. I'm fine, thank you, Chair.
As long as you've had a drink, yeah, just continue. We'll now go to officers to the questions to the officers, please. Councillor Semple.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, just because it's more or less the last thing that you read out was that from the developer. I mean, some big numbers in terms of local labour and local spend. How do we monitor that? How do we know that they're employing that many people?
Two things I'd answer. Thank you, Councillor Semple, for your question. Two things I'd say. There's no guarantee that the labour will be local and what extent that labour will be. However, as a very experienced officer answering that question, those are reasonable numbers, so in terms of the trades, including the subcontract trades and the workforce for a traditional construction. And Genesis, from our experiences, as you know, I'm the building control manager as well as planning, and they will use the wet trades, they will use traditional construction methods, and that sort of density of workforce and local labour is reflected in those previous developments, and I could not see any reason why it wouldn't be again. It would be different if they were using modern methods of construction, so prefabricated buildings that were bringing in from factories, from other parts of the country, but they're not. So that level of labour and investment is what I would advise members accurate in terms of how accurate we can be, albeit not guaranteed, but accurate as far as we our experiences could permit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Reference was made by the first speaker about this 130 houses. So, and then he also mentioned about the assessment for the wildlife area. And there's two parts to this. First of all, are Genesis going to be building the additional houses eventually? And secondly, at 12:59, you do actually say officers consider the amendment about biodiversity gain should reasonably be required to be predetermined. So I assume that means that if we wanted it to be predetermined, it would be for the whole of the area, included in the additional houses that are going to be built eventually. Can we get some reassurance on that?
You can answer one or both those points, Simon, if you want.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. No, it's really relevant questions, and it might be, if I can be permitted, Chair, to provide some background in answering Councillor Fairbrother's question, because, as I say, it is very relevant. So the allocation is for the 130 dwellings, and for a larger area than this application site. So members will be very familiar with officers advising members to determine an application on its own merits against policy. But here, remember, you have a policy, an adopted local plan policy, which is a policy specific to this allocation with site considerations. And therefore, it is imperative, it's really important that members determine this application in the context of, is this going to prejudice the bringing forward of a coherent development of 130 dwellings in accordance with the allocation? There's no problem per se with part of an allocation coming forward. It happens a lot, you know, and I, through my 30 years of planning experience, you know, there's sometimes allocations for 2,500 houses, and a developer might put just forward a detailed application for 100 of them. But what is fundamentally important is that it's clearly shown, if it's not demonstrated how the rest of the site will be developed, members are comfortable that the development of this part doesn't prejudice the coherent development of the site as a whole. Now, you'll see from the officer's assessment is that we consider it does. You know, that this is a large chunk of this jigsaw puzzle. You know, the jigsaw puzzle makes up the overall picture of how the development should look, and we consider that this is a coherent part of that jigsaw puzzle and doesn't prejudice the remainder of the site to the west, or the remainder of the allocation to the west coming forward. But as the speaker said, you know, Mr. Massey and the others, it is an important consideration, and you know, you need to be comfortable, members, you know, looking at the evidence through the report and the statutory consultees representations, as well as the other representations, that you feel that this is a coherent part of the jigsaw puzzle, and that the rest of the site allocation can come forward and it will feel as one in accordance with the site considerations in the adopted local plan. If you didn't have the adopted local plan allocation, then, you know, I'd be clearly saying just consider this site on its merits, but it's very important that you consider that. In answer to your first question, sorry, I was digressing, Councillor Fairbrother, forgive me. There's no guarantee that Genesis would be the developer of the rest of the site. And members need to also bear in mind that there's no guarantee that the rest of the site could come forward for many years. You know, it could be years and years and years, you know, a decade or more before the rest of the site comes forward. So you need to consider those two questions, if you like. What's the implications of the site coming forward on its own? You know, does it fulfill all those policy requirements in part 1 and part 2? And does it form a coherent part of that jigsaw puzzle as intended by the site allocation policy in the local plan part 2? Now, in our minds, looking at statutory consultee responses, including with regard to the wildlife, and having assessed the PEA, the preliminary ecological appraisal, and the surveys, we consider that it does, and we can see how those linkages will work, and we can see, because of how the topography would work, where you get a second access into the site with the farmyard and use and use the field adjacent to the farmyard and leave the land at the bottom of the valley undeveloped, as referred to in the representations. We can see how that would work. Perhaps if I can, Chair, I know time's dragging on, but I think it's really important. I'll just share the screen again, and I'll just go back to so this obviously the Councillor Faber there, I think we can see this. This is, you know, this is where that wildlife area was, and you can the development at the moment, and we can just drop back to the slide in a minute, has the access coming in here, the vehicular access, and then it swings across here and then drops down. And you can, this area is the undeveloped area of the application site. You can see how there would be pedestrian linkages that could be forged to connect this part, you know, the application site, to a developed part of the rest of the allocation, leaving the wildlife area in the corridor to continue along this edge. As officers, when we're assessing the site, you can see how that would work, because you can see these undeveloped areas. This is the rest of the allocation. You can see how this could be developed with this central spine of public open space coming through, accessible from the rest of the allocation and from the application site. You can see how this area, undisturbed wildlife area, could persist. So you can see there's a coherency there. You might not agree, members, you know, it's a very valid question, and it's something that you do, you know, it's what the residents have raised, and it's an important consideration. And, you know, residents have every right to raise that point, because the allocation is the 130 dwellings, and the local plan policy envisage is 130 dwellings to come forward. So how it knits together is really important. We consider that it does, but obviously those residents disagree, and that's, you know, that's a valid, reasonable opinion to take. You know, just if I can be permitted, Chair, just to digress and talk about the implications of the 130 dwellings. One thing members have to remember is that you did adopt the local plan part 2 last week, and things like off-site infrastructure and the impact on Moor Road and the implications on that was considered through the local plan's journey in terms of that highway infrastructure and the requirements. So you just need to bear that in mind. Sorry, elongated answer, Councillor Fairbrother. I hope it's answered your queries.
But we are, Simon.
Thank you.
We're here today to go for 81 houses, not 130. Councillor Daniels.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, could you go back to the slide which shows where the bus stop is at the present? Can you do that for me?
Yep, I'll endeavour to, Councillor Barnes. Just bear with me, please.
Okay, so I'm just thinking those people who live right at the bottom of that of the construction site, they've got a pretty hefty walk to be able to use that bus, haven't they? Is there any provision of maybe you were talking earlier, there might be some walkways through?
Yeah, forgive me, Councillor. I'm sorry to. I don't know what members are seeing on the screen, but my screen is still showing the layout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you want me to actually go to the photographs, Councillor Daniels, or you're happy with the layout?
I'm happy with the layout because okay. I understand the bus stop is just a little bit further down the road from there, isn't it? So, but as you see, I mean, if you're at that, you know, the very end house at the bottom, you've got quite a considerable walk to get to the bus stop, haven't you? And I'm just wondering, if there's a provision that could be a bus stop actually on site, whether a stagecoach would be, or whether they'd be amenable to that, or if we do consider this application, that could be a provision as well. You know, I'm thinking, you're a little old lady or you're a kid, that's, a kid maybe not so much, but without being rude about little old ladies, it's quite a considerable stretch of a walk. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Yeah, no, it's a valid question. It wasn't part of the site considerations in the local plan Part 2 policy, so it wasn't foreseen. But you're right. Obviously, someone who lives in a house in that southeast corner would have to walk up, the slope to the northwestern boundary, cross the road, walk along the footway to the bus stops. Obviously, again, as I say, the local plan foresaw the development control this location, albeit, and this is, I suppose, an answer to Councillor Fairbrother's question as well, and one of the points that residents were making, it would be reasonable to assume if the site was coming forward as one total 130 dwellings, that people could walk in a westerly direction through the site and then up where the farmyard was, rather than having to go up to the proposed access in the northwestern corner of the application site and then along the road. So, that's something to very, very relevant to consider. What I would say is none of the statutory consultees advised that it was necessary. That's point one. Obviously, we consulted the County Highways Authority. And secondly, if members considered it was a reasonable requirement to provide bus stops, and if that was the resolution of members today, I think I can't answer for the applicant, but I think in no doubt they would come back and say, well, that's going to impact on viability and delivery of the scheme. So we probably wouldn't be able to put forward the 4 affordable dwellings, and you'd end up with no affordable dwellings on site. I can't say that would be the applicant's position, but putting an experienced officer's hat on, I'd imagine that would be an inevitable result of bus stop provision. I know that there is a lay-by on the opposite side of the road to the site frontage, which could be amended. That's the eastbound going towards Great Clifton. There's nothing on the westbound carriageway, so there'd need to be quite a lot of engineering works to put a bus stop in on the westbound carriageway. And obviously that, if you think logically about people commuting into Workington for jobs or school or whatever, is where people are likely to be waiting rather than getting off alighting from a bus. They'd be waiting on the westbound side. So that's where probably the more the need would be for a shelter, etc. So I suppose a long-winded answer to you, Councillor Daniels, is that, yes, that is clearly one of the principles of sustainability, and something for members to consider. Yes, developing only this eastern part of the site necessitates people having to walk up to Stainburn Road further east than they otherwise would if the other part of the site came forward, with consequences to the type of journey involved and just how that journey would be attractive to someone to get to a bus. But as I say, there is no statutory consultee representation there. I think, is it reasonable for 81 dwellings? As an officer, I'd say no, but I could see how a different conclusion could be reached. I think one of the main consequences would be the viability of the scheme. So I suppose it's over to members to consider that. The officer advice is clear that it's not reasonably required and would affect viability, but a different view could be arrived at, and it is a relevant consideration. Think about this jigsaw puzzle that, in the absence of the western part of the allocation coming forward at this time, then it does necessitate people in this part having to walk up Stainburn Road and then along Stainburn Road to get to the nearest bus stops. Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Lynch.
I have 3 factual questions.
One at a time.
Yeah. Number 1, have I read this correctly in the report, Simon, that there is going to be, as part of this development, a crossing made on the road? Is that correct?
So that is correct. Not a signal controlled crossing, but an ability for people to cross the road safely. Not a pelican crossing or anything like that. But yes, there is a
so they can get across from the side the development's on to the side where the footpath is.
That's correct.
Do that. Yeah. The second question, up in the northeast corner where the substation is there any landscaping or buffering zone between the developments there, the houses there, and the substation?
I'll probably answer that question best by just sharing that layout plan again, if I can, Councillor Lynch.
Thank you.
So there is a hedge line proposed, but it's not the extent which is the deep hedge line to the road. So there is a hedge line along that boundary, but it is a hedge rather than a landscaping belt along that boundary.
Thank you. And
That's enough, Councillor Lynch. We'll move on to the street. You can come in at the back. Councillor Tyson.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask the officer, well, just for my benefit, the reduction from 80, well, the 81 houses originally, I think, was 72 market and 5, well, a total of 9 affordables. And then this went to 77 market. There was apparently a COVID reason in that as well. Could you, for my benefit, could you just mention that again?
Sorry, Councillor Tyson, I didn't just quite, the last sentence you said there was a something reason I didn't quite catch.
There were several reasons for the developer asking for the sort of increase from 72 market to 77 market. And one of these reasons was apparently some sort of something to do with the COVID change in terms of saleability.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Tyson. So there is a number of reasons, some of them regarding the physical conditions of the site. So when the local plan policies are produced, there is an acknowledgement that the site investigations, the detailed site investigations haven't been undertaken at that stage. And so the local plan policies permit that viability may change the tenure mix, etc. And in those instances, what we require is an open book viability appraisal to be submitted by the developer. And then we, as the council, at the council's expense, instruct a peer reviewer, so a suitably qualified surveyor, to analyse the costings of the that the developers put forward. So what the developer puts forward, and forgive me, Councillor Tyson, if I think it's helpful if I just provide some of this background. So the developer puts forward their costs. So their costs include the cost per square foot, or per square metre, apologies, for the house build. And that will take into account things like foundation types, that sort of thing. And obviously here we've got a sloping site to consider, which increases those costs. There's the infrastructure costs, the actual costs of putting the site services and things in. And again, that is clearly a consideration here. The ground conditions, you know, what types of soils, etc., are, whether there's any unstable land, etc. Again, that's a consideration here and has been verified by the council. Now, it might sound strange, but one of the costs is the developer's profit. So the developer is expected to yield a reasonable level of profit from a site. That's usually in the high teens as a percentage of the gross development value of the site.
Yeah.
So that's one of the costs. There are contingencies built in to a developer's cost. There are the finance for the site. Obviously, the land cost itself is a cost. And offset, obviously, against that is the revenue from the site. So that will, you know, that's the sale of the dwellings, the values, and they use robust information of comparables of what price per square metre dwellings have sold for in the locality. And there's been a number of sites in the locality recently sold new build. And to answer your question, obviously need to take into account wider structural economic factors. So where the market is, and it's reasonable, very reasonable, to take into account how market conditions are affected by things like COVID-19. Now we know that, and we've experienced it because of the demands for the Planning and Building Control Service, a bounce back from latent demand following lockdown. But the overall accepted industry position is, it has had an impact on the construction industry. So there's impacts on costs. There's also impacts on revenues as well, and that's all been evidenced and reviewed by the peer reviewer. Now, what the peer reviewer is saying, and it's outlined in the report, and it's all there on the public website, is that can change.
Yeah.
So the viability may change in the future, and that's something for members to consider. What we've said as officers is that's the position now. It's a robust and reasonable position given where we are now, and what we need to make sure that our local plan part 1 policies are met and to bring forward these allocated sites is developed to come forward now. And so it's only reasonable to apply the viability of where we are now, yeah, with the developer looking to bring a site forward now. It's not reasonable to say, well, we are actually as a council looking forward to development being brought forward in the short term to meet our own policies, to say, well, actually viability might improve about 4 or 5 years down the line. We want you to bring forward the development now, but we want you to bring it forward on the notion that viability might improve 4 or 5 years down the line. Now, if this was, I know 81 dwellings is quite a sizable development, but in actual construction terms, it's not a really big development. If it was a development of hundreds or thousands of houses, then it would be very reasonable to actually put viability review mechanisms in place in a Section 106 agreement, which actually says, well, if viability improves, then we'll actually have more affordable dwellings out of this site. But because we're actually saying that we want developers to be brought forward, and members, you remember memories of panels in the last few months and years where, officers, we've been telling you that these allocated sites haven't come forward, so this is why all these windfall sites have come forward. Here we have a position with a house builder, and it's a house builder, not a landowner or a speculative applicant. It's a house builder saying, we want to build these homes on an allocated site. In response to that, I think we can only reasonably say, yeah, we'll look at the viability as it is right now, because you're a house builder and it's an allocated site. We want these allocated sites to be developed. Again, forgive me, Councillor Tyson, it's probably a very long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that clarifies that there are site-specific considerations which have informed that viability, and the economic cycles and the particular rather unique economic influences of the coronavirus.
No, the penny dropped halfway through.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, Simon, the question I would really like to ask you is, do you think the current infrastructure regarding 80 houses, they're all going to be family houses, how is the local schools going to cope with this? I know we've got a big secondary school a mile down the road, but a particular concern of mine is, with a little school up in Clifton, and I think the junior schools and the primary schools are really going to struggle with more numbers. Can you give us some indication if you think that this will be covered adequately?
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. No, it's a really important question. There's two parts to the answer. The first part is that the statutory consultees, for example, the County Council, who will be assessing these types of applications on their impact on infrastructure, I've come back and said, no objection, they don't need any contributions to infrastructure such as Stainburn Academy, the Workington Academy, for example. The second point is, and again, I refer members back to last Wednesday night, was it, the full council, you adopted a local plan. The local plan included this allocation for the 130 dwellings, and the infrastructure requirements for those 130 dwellings was tested in great detail through the local plan process. So all those statutory consultees, people at the County Council, were all consulted as part of that local plan process, and it was assessed in great detail what those off-site infrastructure requirements were for the 130 dwellings. Obviously, 81 dwellings is part of the 130 dwellings. It would not be reasonable to withhold permitting this application on lack of off-site infrastructure provision when the local plan policy requirements say that infrastructure provision isn't required because it was tested in detail through that local plan policy, and when the statutory consultees such as the County Council haven't come back during this application process to say that it's required. I know residents had great concerns about the use of Moor Road and standard of Moor Road, and it's not rocket science. There will be people living at this development. You think where the employment areas are, Lily Hall, Whitehaven, Sellafield, that there will be a proportion of car-borne journeys that will come out of this development, head west, turn left, Moor Road, up onto the 595, up to Lilihall. It's going to happen. You know, in answer to your question, Councillor Kemp, you know, there is going to be a proportion. They are family homes. A lot of those homes being proposed. There is going to be a proportion of those homes where there's going to be children of school age, and that's going to have demand on local primary and secondary schools. It's a fact. It's been tested through the local plan. Statutory consultees have said no improvements in that school infrastructure are required as a result of this allocation coming forward, or part thereof. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. It's a question, Simon. I don't know if it's relevant or not, but looking at 2 of your slides, this buildings we're going to be discussing today, we're only 2 fields away from Clifton. Is that going to alter the local plan? Because in maybe 5-10 years' time, both Stainburn and Clifton is going to be joined together. We're going to end up with another development like Seaton. Is that a bit detrimental to the local plan if this ever happens? Well, it's just a question that was going through my mind, Simon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. No, it's a valid question, and obviously settlements have their identity, and you know, clearly we don't want coalescence of settlements with their own identity. My short answer to that is twofold, really. Firstly, obviously there's been a full landscape analysis done, and obviously directly to the east of the site you've got already the electricity substation, the petrol filling station, so there is development to the east of the site or already of that nature. And the second thing is, going back to Wednesday night again and full council, the local plan's been adopted and this site is inside the settlement limit for Workington Stainburn. It's inside the settlement limit. That's you know, an extended settlement limit, 1999 settlement limits in the bin now, superseded, gone. You're now on the 2020 part 2. It's inside those settlement limits. It's an allocation, so it's assumed that will come forward. To reiterate, I think more of the consideration, or the consideration, is not actually whether this will coalesce with Great Clifton and the impact to the east. It's what the residents and the town council have been raising is, can this part of the allocation come forward singly, and how does that fit into the jigsaw puzzle with the rest of the allocation going westwards to Stainburn? Hopefully that answers the question, Councillor Smith, but the short question is, part 2 settlement limits adopted inside them.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, one of the presenters, well, both of them really talked about highways and the problem with people speeding from the petrol station coming into Stainburn. And I noticed at paragraph 12.15, the original cost for highways improvements was 150,000, which dramatically dropped to 15,525. So it would appear that the county highways had considered that a lot of work needed to be done, but that the costs have been dramatically reduced. Why was there such a fall in the costs, and have ambitious plans for road safety actually been ditched?
I can't answer on behalf of the County Highways Authority. You're right, Councillor Fairbrother. The level of infrastructure required during the processing of this application fell significantly. All I can say is where we are at now, and you know, £15,525 worth of infrastructure requirements. Yeah, it's a whopping rate reduction from the 150 grand, but the County Highways Authority are advising that's all is required now, and that's all I can say really. That's, you know, that's the robust answer. They're the statutory consultee. They're saying that that's upon reflection all that's required. That's all we can reasonably enforce, because that's what the statutory consultee is saying.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. This is, I'll keep this mercifully brief. My concern, I've been on a number of these where we've had these sort of 50, 60, 80, 100 house developments. My concern is, and Thursby, I live in Thursby, and we've had one of them and it's been a big success. But my concern is, as we enter this brave new world of the Allerdale Plan Part 2, it's amenities and structure, not just simply infrastructure, providing electric, water, etc. It's more about the character. I drive from Thursby to Workington, I see 2 pubs, that's it. The Red Dial and the Greyhound. There's 25 miles of absolutely nothing really. But when you build these developments and you piece them together like a jigsaw, that on their own, this particular application is very difficult to oppose. Very difficult to oppose technically and legally, and we would possibly lose in court if it was contested. But we look at the policy weighting, for example. There's paragraph 11, there's 62 sub-paragraphs, and it's just well thought out. But what's the strategic view of amenities, things like village halls and pubs and clubs and things that give a village, an area character? Is there a strategic overview within this? I don't see that in the plan.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. No, it's a very valid question. Just before I answer Councillor Anderson's question, I just want to point out there's a remark made by Councillor Anderson. Please, members, do not, and I repeat this, do not be concerned with what the implications of things would be if things went to appeal or were challenged. Please just determine this application today on policies. Don't let it enter your heads. I know you wouldn't, members, but about the implications down the line. I know historically councillors have been advised by officers, you're going to get hammered for costs at appeal or things. Don't go there. Just think about the application on its merits today. Don't think about implications, whatever direction you take today. All I ask you to do as members is whatever way you can go today, base it on sound planning reasons, quoting local plan policies. So just an aside there. Answer to your question, Councillor Anderson, I think really I'm going to refer to the Part 2 local plan answer. So the strategic queries about how the wider community and how our places are shaped with, you know, where the community halls are, where the local centres are and things, that's rather shaped by the local plan. And we obviously got the adopted Part 1 and Part 2, which sort of shows that strategic shaping. If you were looking at a windfall site today, I think it would be incredibly reasonable, well within your rights, to say, look, this is getting beyond a joke here. You know, you just got development heading off into a countryside, and where is this community? Where is this anchored to? But what you've got here is an adopted allocation, and the decision has been made by this council at the Part 1 stage, and it's reflected in Part 2's allocations and settlement limits, the two are read together, that you've got Workington as the principal centre, and it includes, for local plan purposes, Stainburn, it includes Harrington, High Harrington. It also includes the parish of Seaton. I know that's a contentious matter that I'm not even going to open up today, but it does. And it has scope at where it foresees development to be in those allocations, and how that as a machine, as a bigger organism, will function with the schools, with the jobs, and with the community provision. Now, looking at that local plan and how allocations are, the short answer to your question, Councillor Anderson, is it foresees this peripheral development, whether it be in High Harrington, whether it be in Seaton, whether it be in Stainburn, whether it be in Ashfield Road in Workington itself, and facilities such as the leisure centre, just here in the centre of Workington, the town centre providing the focal point, obviously the Workington Academy, the Stainburn Academy, the schools. It sees that functioning as a whole, with the ability to commute by cycle, by bus, by car, and let's be honest, by car, to those facilities within the main hub of Workington. Because as residents have pointed out, there isn't those facilities in the area of Stainburn, just like as we know there isn't in High Harrington, for example. There is the assumption that those facilities in Workington as a whole will be used, and that is the ethos of the local plan. Now, you may individually disagree with that approach, members, but it is yours, ours local plan, and it's an adopted local plan. The strategic base of that was adopted in 2014 with part 1, and part 2 was adopted last week. So in a way, it is difficult to sort of question that now, when that is an up-to-date adopted local plan adopted by this council, that strategic vision of where the allocations are, the residential allocations, and where people will work, go to school, where they will play, etc. That's all shaped in that local plan, and it foresees this, developments in places like in Stainburn in this allocation to happen, but for people to shop, work, play, etc. Elsewhere. There is on-site play equipment here. And as I sort of said in my introduction, this is okay. The X4, X5 bus route is not the type of bus route where you can just rock up at a bus stop and a bus will arrive. But actually, for West Cumbria, it's actually a pretty regular good service in relative terms. So it is, and okay, the petrol filling station has limited grocery facilities, as referred to in statements, but it is sustainably close to the site. The academy is on this side of town, so it was reasonable to make the decision that this is where an allocation was going to be sited. And there's also the hard-nosed decision that the council has to take when putting these allocations forward, is that they're based on land that's put forward by landowners and developers. So land that's available, and that there's a tendency, quite understandably, that developers will put land forward where they can actually build houses and make a profit. So they tend to be in those desirable areas like, you know, Stainburn and High Harrington, etc. That's where it comes forward. So you end up with these viable developments on the periphery of settlements, with the focus then on getting people sustainably to the services and facilities in the town to support the town's continued regeneration. Again, another long-winded answer, forgive me, Chair, but hopefully it answers Councillor Anderson's question.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Lynch, you had a third point to your question before. Would you like to ask it now, please?
It's very, very quick. The mature tree in the southwest corner, is that going to remain, Simon?
It's shown on the landscaping plan. It's not protected. It is not protected.
Thank you. Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Should we adopt this plan, Simon? At 1154, the paragraph, it says it's about protecting the Derwent Special Area of Conservation, the River Derwent. It talks quite a lot about that area being close to the development and also SSI being close. And the last sentence says, these mitigation measures can be secured by a construction environmental management plan condition. Does that mean that we have to specifically say what that construction environmental management plan can be? Because with the best will in the world, Genesis in its presentation from John Blue did say that they'd learnt lots of lessons. But our experience in Brigham has been that perhaps some of their construction management has not really been very environmentally friendly. And I'm quite concerned that they actually protect the environment. The reservoir was also mentioned by one of the presenters. So have we to ask for a particular condition there, or do you feel what the management plan condition is already robust enough to secure those vulnerable watercourses?
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. We have got the more generic conditions, but if I can refer you to condition 15 as well on page 39.
You feel that it's robust enough to protect those areas? Yeah,
I do, Councillor Fairbrother. I know, and I will say this, that there are experiences where developers have permissions with conditions, and then it's for the council then to monitor those conditions. And I know, and I'm not going to name developments, but there have been developments that I know members on this panel have brought to my attention personally about conflict with those conditions. It would not be, if a condition is robust and can respond to those matters, which we consider they can, it would be not right or reasonable for a member to make a judgment that that condition is not robust and enforceable based on experiences of developers, nameless developers at nameless developments not adhering to conditions elsewhere. Not going to say it doesn't happen. I know it does happen, but we've got to take it in good trust that a developer will adhere to those conditions, and you can have it from me as the officer that we do, as we have done, enforce compliance with those conditions when imposed. One of the tests of a condition, one of the 6 tests of a condition is it enforceable? My answer to you is that condition is enforceable.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
That ends the questions to officers. Would you like to go into debate now? Who would like to start? propose something? No one? Would anyone like to propose anything? Councillor Semple.
Thanks, Chair. I think, you know, an awful lot of detail here. The overriding thing for me is, you know, I listen to the objections, but it seems to be a development that the area needs. I think it's Simon's talked before about the track record of the development. So I'd like to propose that we accept this, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Semple. We've got a motion on the floor. Is anybody willing to second?
Can I just, before anybody seconds, can I just clarify, Councillor Semple, that in the late papers, there was some amendments to the conditions. So just for the precision of the minute, for your motion put forward, that you're recommending it in accordance with the officer recommendation, which is the subject to conditions under section 106, with the conditions amended by those detailed in the late paper.
Yeah, thanks, and I can confirm that. I mean, there are a number of recommendations out there in the papers we've got in front of us, and obviously I expect those to go ahead before we go to the next stage. But yes, Simon.
Have we got a seconder for that this motion? Councillor Fairbrother? You're on mute, Councillor Fairbrother. Are you seconding the motion, Councillor Fairbrother?
No, I'm not. No, I was going to ask about something in the report, so I'll just wait. Thank you. Sorry.
Have we got a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Smith? You're muted, Alan.
The most fun over the place with me mouse. Sorry, Chair. I'd like to move deferment. I'm not happy with the road layouts and the examples what was expressed by the first speaker. I think that the county council needs to look at the infrastructure regarding that development and the one that they put in earlier. So I would move deferment on those grounds, please.
Well, let's check with Manager Officer now.
Chair, can I just check, we need to know whether there's a seconder to the first motion before we move on.
Who is going to second the first motion?
If it
Councillor Lynch. Councillor Lynch?
Yes, I would second the first motion.
Thank you. Is that right, Sharon?
That's right. We do have a motion and a seconder on the table for approval with the conditions set out in the report, but councillors, I think, wanted to move a deferment for a site visit. Was it Councillor Smith?
That's right, Sharon. Yeah. On the evidence or the statement I heard at the start of the proceedings from the first speaker, there's concerns by residents regarding the road layout and entrances and exits. I think that the county council needs to have a look at the plans and come back with a better road layout. Then I'll be happy with the application. Then, thank you, Chair.
Chair, you now need to see if there's a seconder for Councillor Smith's deferment motion for a site visit.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Smith's deferment, please? Councillor Horsley?
Yeah, thanks there. Yeah, definitely I'll second Councillor Smith's. I've got the same concerns with that.
Thank you, Daniel.
Sorry, Chair, I just want to clarify because I'm slightly confused about Councillor, the motion put forward. Is this for a site visit and for clarification from the county council, or actually looking for clarification on the internal arrangements or the external arrangements? I'm slightly confused. Forgive me, Chair.
Not a site visit, Simon. Not a site visit. Just that the concerns what were raised by the first speaker sent alarm bells ringing into me. I think that the county council needs to look at the road layouts again and make the infrastructure better, because, like I say, you've got the Briery Hub entrance. You've got the new entrance coming to this one here. You've got the filling station. There's numerous things there.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Okay, I'll probably defer to the Sharon as the head of service here, but I just want for the clarification from members of the public watching and the press and other members, because when it was clarified, Councillor Smith, what your motion was, I think it was whether it was a site visit, and I don't know whether Councillor Horsley was seconding a site visit or whether Councillor Horsley was actually seconding that the desire to reconsult the county highways on off-site infrastructure, which is what I understand you were moving, Councillor Smith.
He was moving deferment, Simon. He wasn't moving a site visit.
Simon's correct. I thought Councillor Smith was moving for a site visit.
No.
Or is not.
No. It's just for a deferment, Shannon. Is that right, Alan? Councillor Smith?
We're deferring, Sharon, because of the reasons what were given by the first speaker. I need those clarified, that the concerns what were raised, I think need addressed by the county council. I don't think it needs a site visit. I just think it needs deferred until the county council come back with different road layouts, what was emphasised by the first speaker. I can't remember exactly what they were, because it's that long ago. You know, it's Simon.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Smith. It's really important. Is this to do with the internal arrangement of the site as proposed, or the external highways infrastructure?
External, Simon.
External.
Yeah.
So the external highways infrastructure required to make the development acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously it's for members to decide. I'll just reiterate that has been tested through the local plan part 2 process, that you did adopt a local plan part 2, which assumed 130 dwellings here last week. You adopted it last week at full council with no highways infrastructure other than what's on the table today, and that was tested through the local plan process. Obviously, it's members, you can defer it and ask the County Highways Authority to reconsider, given that it went through the local plan process and they've commented on this application. I'd imagine they'll come up with the same answer as they have done today.
So what have we not? We've got a motion on the floor and we've got a deferment on the floor. Which do we take first, Shannon?
Councillor Smith, do you still want to have your motion put forward, taking into account the officer's advice?
Yes, please.
And is that still seconded, Councillor Horsley?
It is, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we would take the, well, is there any more debate, Chair? Because I know Councillor Fairbrother had...
Councillor Fairbrother,
before.
You're muted, Janet.
I was actually going to second Councillor Smith's motion, but I think we just need to remember that they did propose to spend 150,000, the Highways Department, first of all, or the County Council did, and then it was reduced. So I think Councillor Smith has a good point, that the road structure could possibly be much improved. Thank you.
Thank you. So which do we vote for first, Sharon, please?
The deferment, Chair. But obviously members must take into account Simon, the manager of the planning and building control services, advice around that. The council have adopted the local plan and the county highways have responded as a statutory consultee.
Yeah. Taking into consideration the county council have already come forward on this, we'll take a vote on the motion for deferment. Is that right?
Chair, we still have Councillor Lynch had wanting to speak there. I don't know if that's still the case before we move on.
You're muted, Elaine.
Sorry, yes, please. Looking at the local plan that we adopted last week, it is clear that it does say wider transport infrastructure improvements may be required as determined by a transport assessment. And it appears to me in what we have in front of us that transport assessment has taken place. We've seen the map with the displays and everything. The speed limit is going to be reduced to 40. There is going to be a crossing point, which is why I asked this particular question. And my opinion from what we have in front of us is that transport assessment has been as good as it can be for this particular development. And I would not question it.
Thank you. Councillor Fairbrother.
I think it's important to notice that crossing point in this plan means a little island in the middle of the road, and you've got to cross it twice if you wish to get to the shop at the garage, as far as I am aware. So it isn't as easy as it sounds. I had to cross the A66 to get to Broughton, and there's just a little island in the middle, and I can tell you it's pretty scary. So I wouldn't call that a crossing point myself. It's not very robust.
So where do we go now, Sharon, please?
If there's no more debate or questions from members, if Simon wants to come in before the vote as the planning officer, and if he has no comments, then it would be for the vote.
No, to you, Simon.
Yeah, no, I think Councillor Lynch actually summarised what I was going to say anyway, so no further comments from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. So we'll go on Alan Smith's motion for deferment.
Yeah, Chair, I'll do that for you. Yeah, so members, I'm just going to go through the list alphabetically. If you can just repeat your name and your intention to vote for, against or abstention with the deferment. So we'll start with Councillor Annison.
Councillor Annison reluctantly against.
Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Daniels for.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Councillor Fairbrother for.
Councillor Granger.
Councillor Granger against.
Councillor Horsley.
Councillor Horsley for.
Councillor Kemp.
Councillor Kemp for.
Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Lynch against.
Councillor Semple.
Councillor Semple against.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith for.
Councillor Tyson.
Councillor Tyson against.
Chair, we have 5 votes in favour of the deferment, 5 votes against, no abstentions.
Have I got a casting vote?
Yeah.
If the monitor officer would just clarify that.
Yeah, Chair, you have a casting vote.
We'll go for against, please.
Thank you. The motion was lost.
Chair, do you now want to go to the vote on the original motion, which is?
We'll go now for the voting on Councillor Semple's motion.
You have a question, Chair, before that.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Yes, coming back to my first question to Simon about at 12:59, it says that we can predetermine the biodiversity net gain. Do we have to put any particular detail in there, Simon, before we accept the proposal, or does predetermination mean we can add detail later? That's paragraph 12.59.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. Yeah, you need to consider it now, but we consider that the landscaping plan which they're proposing, together with the conditions that we are proposing as officers, lock that in place for that biodiversity net gain.
Thank you, Simon.
Can I just add a detail to that, please, Chair? I noticed this before, that access for hedgehogs between fences and walls is a very good measure to put in place, because hedgehogs can't get through fences and walls on some of these new developments. And I would like to propose that that is somewhere within that biodiversity net gain condition. That's acceptable, Simon.
Thank you. Lee?
Before we go to Lee, I just want to respond to Councillor Fairbrother, because
sorry, Simon.
Yeah. I think it would be an addition, Councillor Fairbrother, to condition 7 to explicitly mention the hedge. I mean, it's a very valid point. So it would be an explicit addition to condition 7 to incorporate hedgehog routes, hedgehog gaps within boundary treatments across the site to be included. So I'm presuming and looking to Sharon for confirmation as to whether Councillor Semple, I think, would want, whether the motion would want to be amended to include that addition. I'll probably defer to Sharon for that guidance.
If the mover and second agreed to the addition of that amendment, then that's the one we could vote on.
Councillor Semple, do you agree to that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I do, and you know, Councillor Fairbrother has mentioned this very issue before, and I really do think it's absolutely vital, and I thank her for that. I fully accept it.
And the second,
Councillor Lynch, you a seconder?
Yes, I agree to that. That's fine. Yeah, yeah.
we can go to the vote now, Chair, if there's no more question. That amendment from Councillor Fairbrother has been incorporated into the motion, which has been seconded.
Chair, would you like me to go to the vote?
Chair's screen is frozen, I've noticed, members, so might just need an adjournment while we get Chair back.
Right, okay, at this point then, if we can all knock our cameras off and put ourselves on mute and return at 15:35. Thank you. Okay, Chair, we're all back on the meeting.
Thank you, Lee. My internet went off.
Okay, well, we were going to go to the vote for approval. Oh, is that okay with you, Chair?
To vote for Councillor Semple's motion. Will you take it to you, Lee?
Okay, thank you. Members, I'll just go through in alphabetical order. So we'll start with Councillor Annison.
Councillor Annison, taking into account the addition from Councillor Fairbrother to Councillor Semple's motion, I'll vote for.
Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Daniels for.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Councillor Fairbrother against.
Councillor Granger.
Councillor Granger for.
Councillor Horsley.
Councillor Horsley against.
Councillor Kemp.
Councillor Kemp against.
Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Lynch for.
Councillor Semple.
Councillor Semple for.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith against.
Councillor Tyson.
Councillor Tyson for.
Chair, we have 6 in favour of the motion, 4 against, no abstentions. The motion is carried.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you. Thank you, people. Now we'll have a short break. We'll be back at 1:45 the hour. 15:47, Alan, Mr. Councillor Tyson.
Councillor Kemp, have you got a question? You're on mute.
Sorry, Lee, but I'm going to have to leave the meeting now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody back at 15:47, please.
Thank you. Chair, all the members are on the meeting, and can I just confirm for the next item that the speaker is on the call?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Chair, you seem to be on mute.
Thank you, Lee. Sorry, it was my button was wrong. So we'll go on to item 5. I've lost it. Item 5 is VAR stroke 2019 stroke 0008 application for variations of condition 2 on planning approval 2 stroke 1993 stroke 0767 to enable food, drink and tobacco to be sold from units B and C, Derwent Drive, Workington. Over to you, Lee. Is there a Simon?
Yeah, go to Simon first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So members may recall this application coming before them in October 2019. And there's a brief précis of the history of the application on page 46 of your agenda today, paragraphs 2.1, 2.2 in particular, and I can refer members to those. You'll see the application was reported in October to panel, and members, you made a resolution to approve subject to the signing of a Section 106 agreement, which basically required the applicant to surrender retail floor space, the permission within their control, which they can do. Many months have elapsed since October. We're obviously beyond the 6 months, and that's the reason why this application is before you again today. Now, it's no fault of the applicant or the local authority. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes in economic circumstances since October 2019. It's resulted, one of the reasons is that the intended occupier of the unit has changed, and that's obviously a reasonable thing that can happen. And I remind members not to determine applications based on a particular brand or a particular business occupier. We do this on the use and the impact on the town centre, Workington town centre. That's your principal consideration amongst others, albeit you do have to determine the application in accordance with the development plan as it exists at the time of determination, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So your policy context change since October 2019 is the fact that part 2 of the local plan has been adopted, but as you'll see from the officer's report, that hasn't actually resulted in any material changes in policy context which would lead a different decision to be made. So that's the first point. The second point is, has there been any changes in site considerations? And again, no, there hasn't. So there has been that change in the amount of floor space under question, and that's detailed in policy 2.2. And you can see the conclusions from the officer's report that with that necessary surrendering of the required surrendering of the floor space in place, which is subject to the Section 106, the development is acceptable, and there wouldn't be the unacceptable impact on the viability and vitality of Workington town centre. So we are really in the same position we were in October 2019, albeit the local plan part 2 has been adopted, albeit there is a change in the floor space involved as detailed in paragraph 2.2 of the report. And the 106 is close to being to be completed and signed, but unfortunately, due to the circumstances, one of which is COVID, we didn't get the get the matter over the line within the 6 months as per the members' resolution in October. So that's where we are. I will very briefly, Chair, go through the slides just to remind members where this location is, and if technology permits me to do so, which it doesn't by the looks of it. No.
Give me a moment, Simon. I'll put it on mine.
Okay, thank you, Lee. I knew with a Windows 7 machine chugging away for this amount of time, just to fill in while Lee's doing it, I have my brand new machine sitting next to me, ready for powering up next time. Members will be pleased to hear this one's finally bitten the dust on the last panel that it's going to be used for. Thanks, Lee. So members are familiar, it's an out-of-town retail site, hence the need to go through the sequential test and the retail impact as laid out in the development plan, consistent with the National Planning Policy Framework, hence the necessity in this particular case to require the Section 106 to safeguard Workington Town Centre. If there was a net addition of the amount proposed, it wouldn't be acceptable, but the applicant is using those matters within their control to ensure that isn't the case, as detailed in the recommendation before members. So if you want to scroll down, Lee, members may be familiar with the site. There's the normal range of national chains that operate from this area. Members will be familiar with the site. To the south, there's further out-of-town retail, people like Pets at Home, Morrison's, etc. in that area. If you want to scroll down again, Lee. So there will be changes in the units. You can see the plan referring to units B and C there towards the centre of that building. And if you scroll down again, Lee, there's an amalgamation into Unit B, which you can see second in from the right there. So that's the unit which is amalgamated. You can see the variations only sought to include units A and D, and the condition which refers to the old A and D. Very confusing, but it's clearly detailed in the report, and probably paragraph 2.2 is the best one to refer to. If you want to scroll through again, Lee. So you can see the type of players that operate here: Comparison Goods, Dunelm, Carpetright, Benson's for Beds. They're all comparison retailers. There isn't a convenience retailer amongst them at the moment. That's the other view. These are slides taken last year. I can assure members that context hasn't changed since last year. You can see at the back there is an Aldi store at the back of the site. So there is a convenience retailer in the vicinity. Okay, I think that's fine. It gives members the picture. So there are no latent item matters on the list, Chair. So as I say, it's a simple matter about convenience and comparison, floor space, and the need to protect Workington Town Centre's vitality and viability. There's been robust assessment of that. You can see that there is the site available at the Central Way. And had it not been for the Section 106 proposed, this proposal would not be acceptable. But we have a willing applicant willing to sign up to this Section 106 and ensure that there isn't that net increase in floor space. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, do you want me to
Simon.
introduce the speaker?
Thank you, Simon. Who's the speaker? Mrs. White?
Yeah. So, Mrs. Julie White, please can you unmute, and you'll have 5 minutes to deliver your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't take up too much of your time. It's been a long afternoon, and I'm mainly here to just answer any questions. But just to reiterate your officer's report, it was unfortunate we weren't able to complete the Section 106 within the 6-month deadline originally specified, but we are now in a position to move that forward, and we've agreed the wording with your officers. So we are very keen to get the Section 106 completed now, and as Simon has said, the only alteration is actually a reduction in the food and drink floor space sought. So I trust officers will again support the application and that we can move the Section 106 forward to completion. As I say, I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you, Chair.
Any questions from Mrs. White, please? Councillor Semple.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question really is, who do you see as being your customer or customers?
Well, as I say, the applicant is actually the freeholder to the whole of the retail park. They are in discussions with an operator at the moment, but I'm not unfortunately at liberty to say who that is at present.
Right. No more questions for the speaker. Thank you, Mrs. White. Thank you for your time. Lee?
We don't have any further speakers, Chair.
Thank you. Questions to our officers? Simon Sharp. Anybody with questions for Simon? Councillor Annison.
Yeah, just a very quick one, Simon. I have no doubt about the sincerity whatsoever of this case, but what are the provisions for any failure to sign this 106?
The provisions, if there is a failure to sign the Section 106, we will bring the matter back before panel. No doubt with the failure to sign the Section 106 with a different recommendation as policy stands.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Tony. Any more questions for Simon? Anybody want to go into debate? Or anybody want to approve something? Any motions? Councillor Daniels.
I would propose we accept the recommendation and go forward on this. That site's been empty for a long time. It'd be nice to see some retail activity. So I'm quite happy to propose that we go forward and move lastly. Thank you.
Is this taken into the consideration the
106?
The 106, the conditions delegated to planning. Thank you.
Yeah.
Have we got a seconder? Councillor Smith?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. What do we do now, Lee? Just go for a vote. Shannon?
If there's nothing,
If there's no further debate, Chair, you can hand over to Lee to take the vote.
Right. Any further debate, please?
Move
Right,
to the vote, Chair.
Sorry?
Move to the vote.
We'll go to the vote. We'll hand over to our competent Lee.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'll just go through you all alphabetically. We'll start with Councillor Annison.
Councillor Annison for the motion.
Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Daniels for the motion.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Councillor Fairbrother for.
Councillor Granger.
Councillor Granger for.
Councillor Horsley.
Councillor Horsley for.
Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Lynch for.
Councillor Semple.
Councillor Semple for.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith for.
Councillor Tyson.
Councillor Tyson for.
9 in favour, no against, no abstention, Chair. Motion carried.
Motion carried. Thank you very much, folks. I call this meeting of Allerdale Council Development Panel to a close.